The Buddha's Enlightenment, the Buddha's Teaching, and the Buddhist Practice by Venerable Rungruang Papassaro, Dr. Rungruang Limchoopatipa. The subject of problems of defilements such as greed, hatred, depression, and anxiety is quite well known to everyone. But the challenging question is how to get rid of it. Conventionally, in mantra meditation we try to force or suppress the mind to stand still for a while. Yes, it may work, but the Buddha explained that it could be only temporary because the suppressed mind might burst out anyway. It's just a matter of time. The Buddha suggested that the study on the mind was the only path and way to resolve this problem rightly by wisdom. The instructed cognition of the mind through introspective learning will guide the mind processing into the right direction to avoid the dysfunction of the mind. The enlightenment of the Buddha was an interesting concept of learning the truths of life within nature by the threefold study strategy. At present, we have modern sophisticated tools and equipment like fMRI to investigate the mind and its functions. Moreover, the traditional mantra meditation has a limitation that can only force the mind to be temporarily calm. In order to be able to see the insight, the quality of consciousness must be very high, and the way to improve the quality of consciousness is achieved by improving the qualities of both mindfulness and concentration together. In this circumstance, the Buddha had to develop a new way of meditation by combining mindfulness with concentration to observe mind conditions clearly. That is, by establishing mindfulness to check mind conditions, and in case the mind was unwholesome, then abandon it so that the mind will be internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. By doing so, mindfulness will make the mind concentrated, and in return, the concentration will enhance the quality of mindfulness. This was a new way to make the mind concentrated, so-called the right concentration, and then a purified mindfulness with equanimity will be developed to perform an insight observation, and then after collecting sufficient information from observed data. After completing the insight observation, having sufficient observed data, and then applying the Four Noble Truths to analyze them to gain knowledge. The new way of meditation and insight observation led to the discovery of knowledge for the destruction of all kinds of defilements from the beginning to the accomplishment, which was collectively called the Enlightenment. On the day of the Buddha's enlightenment, he not only discovered such a special technique of mindfulness meditation and insight observation, but he also applied this knowledge to destruct all kinds of defilements. Then the mind was liberated, and this was the way to make an end of suffering in life. What collectively happened on the day of the Buddha's enlightenment was the beginning of Buddhism, a great knowledge to mankind. The three issues, the Buddha's enlightenment, the Buddha's teaching, and the Buddhist practice, are closely interconnected as a unique system. That is, the Buddha discovered the truths of life in his enlightenment, then he thought about this knowledge in the Buddha's teaching, and the way to investigate his teaching is to perform the Buddhist practice to understand his enlightenment and his teaching. The phrase to investigate the Buddha's words means to say performing the Buddhist practice by inspecting each mental phenomenon one by one and then checking if it abides by the Buddha's teaching or not. If so, then we can understand and follow the Buddha's teaching rightly. Traditional religions are based on beliefs, and the goal of religious practice is primarily to make communication with God or spirits. In comparison, the Buddha encourages studying the truths of nature instead. His discovery is the great enlightenment of the knowledge on the truths of life within nature. Therefore, the focus of the Buddhist practice is directly to study the truths of life within nature through the study on the mind and its functions to gain knowledge, or Dharma, which can be summarized in the threefold study strategy, which consists of morality study, mind study, and wisdom development, as follows.
A farmer, when growing rice, must follow 3 steps. First, preparing the soil, then adding water and wheatgrass in, and finally, when the ear of paddy appears, removing the water from the rice field before harvesting. Just as the farmer must follow these steps, so too, in Buddhism, we follow the Buddhist studies in the threefold strategy as outlined below. The study on morality, designed to resolve the rough defilements. The study on the mind, executed to resolve the middle defilements. The study on wisdom is to serve the purpose of the destruction of the finest defilements.
The Venerable Sariputta explained the meaning of the Buddhist studies in accordance with the threefold study strategy to study on the truths of life within nature, Dharma, in the Sutta of the lecture on actions taken to be excellent as follows.
To be pleased with hearing the true Dharma, the truths of nature. To review the Buddha's teachings to understand the true Dharma. To establish mindfulness with careful attention, to perform the Buddhist practice in accordance with the Buddha's teachings, and to contemplate on the Dharma. To investigate the true Dharma. To establish mindfulness in accompaniment with Dharma for the destruction of all kinds of defilements. Through dedicated Buddhist practice, that is, performing mindfulness meditation, one will cultivate purified mindfulness, free from bias toward any arising mental phenomena. This process enables insightful observation on Dharma, ultimately leading to a profound realization of life's truths and true nature. When establishing mindfulness with careful attention, the mind will become glad, raptured, relaxed, and concentrated, then apply purified mindfulness in performing insight observation to see the Dharma and then attain wisdom for the destruction of all the taints. As a result, the mind will become purified, and then the mind becomes disenchanted and dispassionate to the world, and consequently the mind is liberated from all suffering in life. This is the way to gain wisdom of knowing what is right and what is wrong and what we should do or what we should not do clearly. This is called Buddhist study.
It should be noted that in Buddhist studies, there is no mantra or supernatural power mentioned in this sutta. The knowledge gained from the Buddhist practice is an introspective learning for cognition. The Buddhist wisdom has nothing to do with any mantra. The Buddhist practice is purely based on the way to study in searching for the truths of life. The mantra meditation, to dwell the mind into a specific state such as happiness or emptiness without studying the true nature of the mind, is not the path and way for enlightenment. The Buddha introduced the Buddhist practice by making use of mindfulness to observe and study the mind and its functions to understand how a life really was in his enlightenment. In this effort, there were two main innovations in the Buddhist practice. Firstly, the mindfulness meditation to replace the mantra meditation, and secondly, a new technique of insight observation to see inside the mind. It is very important to understand that these two parts are a seamless process of the mindfulness meditation, called samatha, the insight observation, so-called vipassana. In this circumstance, the concentration by seclusion from the mindfulness meditation will cleanse up all background noises and, in the meantime, enhance the quality of mindfulness to be more powerful to clearly see inside the mind. As a result, we can monitor mind conditions and study the mind, so-called research on Dharma, through performing an insight observation to gain knowledge for the destruction of the finest defilements inside the mind. After that, by establishing mindfulness with this knowledge, the mind is liberated, and this is the Buddhist way to make an end of suffering in life.